good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this presentation. My name is Andrew Lowe. I'm a longtime IBMer. Most recently, I'm the lead architect for IBM Public Cloud Observability Solutions. This includes IBM Cloud Monitoring and Sysdig Secure, both of which are built on technology from Sysdig. I have Durgesh here with me. We'll be presenting some of the features of Sysdig Secure. Durgesh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Durgesh, and I'm working with Sysdig and now closely with IBM to present some of the features we have built for the Sysdig Secure on IBM Cloud.
So, I'll give a little brief history of how we got here in terms of IBM and Sysdig working so closely together. I've been fortunate enough to be part of that, the relationship between Sysdig and IBM right from the beginning. Previous to running with Sysdig, we had our own homegrown monitoring solution, and running a cloud scale monitoring solution and security, very difficult at that level. So we took the decision to partner with a company that had done it and done it well. And Sysdig's got a really nice native container strategy. They are very much in the modern cloud native space, and it brought a lot of great features to the product. We've worked with Sysdig extensively to bake a lot of the IBM Cloud specific things into the product as well. So what we're really looking at here is a little bit of a best of breed product from Sysdig, but one that's been melded into IBM Cloud to bring out unique aspects that only can be done as a cloud service provider. So we'll get more details of this, but let's look at some of the features of Sysdig Secure. Durgesh.
Thank you, Andrew, for that quick rundown of the history. And I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So as Andrew mentioned, we have two products with IBM. Once you log into the IBM Cloud Monitoring solution, you have the option to look at Sysdig Secure and Sysdig Monitor. For the purposes of today's demo, we're going to focus on Sysdig Secure. And when you log in for the Sysdig Secure on IBM Cloud, you get this operational view of your Kubernetes activity with a summary list of events on the right-hand side and a detailed list of events as well. But before I jump in and start talking about the details, I just want to quickly run through all the tabs that are there on my left. So when we think about the product for cloud operators, developers, and engineers alike, we have this image scanning and the build time scanning tab, where we talk about things like image results, what type of hosts we are scanning, can we scan at admission controller level, what type of vulnerability exception lists can we build, right? And what are the different type of alerts we can configure for this persona. Then the second tab I usually talk about, Andrew, is the runtime threat detection, because one of the stellar features of this product is the ability to leverage Falco open source project and use it in runtime threat detection for containers, right? And we'll spend some time here. And the final thing, and this policies and runtime threat detection is especially useful for the incident response teams or SOC teams or the decision and actions response teams that we usually see in various customers. And the final thing that we should talk about today is the posture tab, which is our focus on the compliance side of the house, where we will talk about various benchmarks and best practices that can be incorporated.
So if we think a little bit about, IBM's customers and IBM's, a leader in the industry in terms of working with, a lot of enterprise customers, we set the standards for a lot of things. IBM does have a public cloud. It's not necessarily as well known as the other big cloud vendors, but we have a very unique perspective. I call it specifically the financial services cloud that IBM's launched, which is a validated subset of IBM Cloud Services right now, but a growing set. And this is intended to make it really easy for financial institutions to come and secure their data in the cloud and meet all the requirements that they have for compliance and security that have been in the industry a long time, but out of on-premise systems, dedicated hardware, and then bringing it to the benefit of the public cloud, where you can get out of managing your own data centers, managing your own hardware expense, scale on demand, but also meet all of those audit and compliance requirements. When we look through the Sysdig product here, we see tooling that makes it easier to achieve those compliances as a team. So, you may be a developer in an enterprise situation and you care about securing your code. You may be an ISV building a framework or a component that's going to be used by those teams. All these things are great reasons to take a look and say, I need to do something more secure. Maybe you're not in a financial institution. Maybe you just really care about security. We look at a lot of the European laws coming to place, a lot of the attacks that are happening. You really don't want to work for a company that's headlined in the news saying, guess what? So-and-so leaked all this data, right? Like, you don't want to be there. That's a, potentially career-ending kind of move if you make a mistake. So the more tools you can apply, the more automation you can have, it just gives you a sense of security, lets you sleep at night and not worry about that 3 a.m. call that's going to come in saying, oh my God, something bad has happened. Someone's in our systems and I don't know what's going on. So, Durgesh.
So back to image scanning here on the product side. And what I want to talk about is the image results really quickly. So this platform will give you the aggregated results of your image scans, whether they be at runtime or be at build time. And we have 4 different intervention points for scanning your images. The first one is, of course, the build pipeline itself. The second one is where we have these inline scanners, and we are scanning on your nodes or clusters during runtime. The third one is like the during the Kubernetes admission controller, where we have the option of basically rejecting images which do not meet your expectation or your compliance mandates. Uh, and the final one is, of course, you can do a quick scan directly where you can specify an image or a repository or a registry and do a scan manually, right? And all of these results can be exported out of Sysdig, and you can take them to your favorite incident response tool or any other tools that you might be using. So I'm going to briefly talk about scanning policies. These are the build time policies that you can define within Sysdig Secure. And we have multiple default policies configured for you out of the box. And these typically correlate to the mandates, such as for healthcare, we have HIPAA, we have one for GDPR, we have one for NIST 800. So when you look at these policies, the policy is basically made up of a rule set, and you can have various types of rules, and these rules can detect what type of vulnerabilities exist, what are the different severities within those vulnerabilities. If it's a Docker file, then it can look for a instruction set in there, right? And you can even customize the policy, right? And you can have different type of rules in there. So for example, if I want to check for something like a password file, I can do that, and I can blacklist an image with a certain password file in there, right? And I can also check if there are certain secret scans left secrets left inside those registries, and I can do content based regist checks. So those are the different options that you have while building policies and rules. And you can also have these rules triggered and tagged to multiple different policies, as I was mentioning before. But the good thing is you can also have these vulnerability exception lists. So we have defined this default exception list, and you can add as many vulnerabilities as you need in this list, in each list. And then you can apply these vulnerability lists to different registries or repositories that you're scanning. So real quick here, right? You create the policies. You create policies for scanning, then you create the vulnerability exceptions, then you go to policy assignments, and you can assign policies to different registries and repositories and then tag them. And you can have multiple policies applied to a certain particular repository which you want to protect. And finally, you can also define an exception list for that particular registry, right? So that is like a brief overview of the image scanning, and we have multiple other things in there. So one important aspect of this is the alerts, and you can schedule multiple alerts. And let's say if we want to have a certain repository to throw an alert when a scan result has changed, we can do that using these built-time alerts, and Sysdig communicates it back to you using your favorite notification channel. It can be via Slack, or via email, or via PagerDuty. And we support multiple other notification channels, such as even via webhooks, right? So before I move on to the next section, I would like to go back to Andrew and discuss a bit more about scanning.
Yeah, of course. So, one of the challenges as a developer in the cloud is, especially building containers, is you take you build on top of an existing container, right? Every developer usually, deeply understands the piece of code that they're working on, but that's built on top of a stack of other stuff, right? And that's one of the values of, being able to scan this stuff is it's not just your code that's being scanned, but all the components in the container. You probably all remember Log4j and that excitement. And, maybe you could talk a little bit about how Sysdig responded to Log4j with some of the additional rules and stuff that were put in place so that consumers of this could very quickly identify, do I have, like, there were people running around going, oh my God, do we have Log4j? And you're like, guys, this isn't even a Java application. Like, why would we have Log4j? But maybe deep inside that container, there was some Java componentry and you had to be worried about that. Durgesh.
Yeah, definitely. So we have threat intelligence teams within Sysdig who are extremely in tune to what's happening in the cybersecurity space. So whenever a vulnerability like Log4j gets out, we have them working on creating policies and reports that target that particular vulnerability. So on the UI, you can look at scanning, and then in scanning policies, we had the Log4j detection policy created by our researchers. And what it did was basically it blacklisted the images with these vulnerability IDs, and it stopped them from getting deployed whenever a CI/CD pipeline ran. So this was the build phase protection we put in place with regards to Log4j. And for just to get an understanding whether there are any vulnerabilities with regards to Log4j in our infrastructure, we had certain reports scheduled daily. So this is a good example of that. So this report, if you go to scanning and schedule report, you can look at the detect Log4j vulnerabilities in registries. It basically looks for vulnerabilities that have been already deployed and inspects them, and it throws in the alerts if this report contains those vulnerabilities, right? And the notification channel is as needed. And we can also preview the data of this report. We can click on preview. This is basically a snapshot of the data that would be sent out in the report. Thus, in this way, we can stay up to date about any future vulnerabilities that might arise.
Awesome. Now that you've shown us the Log4j, it really represents, the cool things that we're doing with Sysdig Secure. I think you're going to talk next about some of the runtime security in Falco. And, runtime is a different problem than, hey, the containers that I have deployed or am about to deploy in my, CI/CD pipeline, great. But what about active threats that are happening right now that are an aspect of, production systems and runtime? So, Durgesh, can you talk a little bit about the Falco pieces?
Absolutely. So Sysdig is one of the leading contributors of Falco. We in fact built this Falco project and then donated it to the CNCF community. And we have a large team which works exclusively day and night to keep Falco up to date. And Falco can be thought of as this baby monitor camera for your containers and your cloud. So what happens with a baby monitor is every time there's motion or some sort of suspicious activity, it captures that snapshot and makes it available for you to view on your screen. Falco does the same with containers. Every time there's a suspicious activity, you are able to detect that kind of activity with the condition that you have certain rules set that can detect that activity. So let's quickly jump in and look at that piece.
Very, very cool. I don't have babies anymore. My kids have grown up a bit, but I do have a bird nesting outside of my front door, and I've set up a camera and a similar motion caption system that tells me when there's activity. So I get to see the baby birds being fed with recorded videos. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So like I said, Sysdig Secure integrates Falco really well. We support Falco policies. We support Falco rule sets, macros, and we even have a little rules editor that can help you change your rules that you have written. And when I talk about the Falco rules library, which is built in the open source world, you can integrate and reuse all of those rules back within Sysdig Secure. So we have tagged each of these rules to the relevant best practices or security benchmarks or even compliance mandates within this library, and you can reuse these rules in a policy, right? So let's take a look at a runtime policy. And let's say we want to have a simple policy which detects is there any kind of modification within your Kubernetes users. And we see here that there are 6 or 7 rules associated with this policy, and we are able to actually edit this policy. So when we click on the edit button there, we are able to add more rules. We can even write rules over here, and then we can select our notification channel, right? And this rule, whenever the conditions of any of these rules are not met or are met, then you have the option of capturing activity using this policy. So a particular example that I always like to quote is I have a policy which detects something like a terminal being popped out in a shell. So there's this terminal shell in a container policy, and it has just one simple rule where it detects if someone's using a command line shell to do malicious activity within your infrastructure, right? And uh, this rule detects that, and then it triggers uh, the activity capture of related events. So for example, there was a terminal shell in container event that was detected by this rule, and it actually triggered multiple policies. So you can have this rule be a part of multiple different policies, and then it captures the different syscall level details that got captured at that point of time, right? And containers are ephemeral. So what this helps is it captures the detail even after the container is long gone, right? And it gives you all the details with regards to the scope or the cluster of the Kubernetes related detail, or even the host related details and the process, right? So what you can do is you can actually look a bit deeper in this particular event. So I'm going to choose another terminal shell in a container event.
Hey, if I could just interject here while
Yeah.
you're setting up the next part. One of the cool things we didn't mention here is that Sysdig Secure is built on top of the same data stream that the Sysdig Monitor agent gathers. So if you've already selected to use Sysdig Monitor to monitor your containers and your other pieces of infrastructure in the cloud, which is we try to make very easy to do on the IBM Cloud. But even just as any user, any Linux system, any container system, you can drop in a Sysdig agent. It's gathering all the data you need to drive Sysdig Secure. So a lot of people are already fully enabled to start using Secure. They just need to get the tool and start using some of these policies to alert or detect things. So it's really a nice bit of magic that's built on top of some of the core monitoring capabilities we have with that monitoring system.
So we have multiple events here for which the file capture has been triggered. When we click on the terminal shell in container event, we can see a respond button. And when I click on the button, I can actually take two actions. Either I can look at the activity audit within Sysdig Secure on IBM Cloud, or I can inspect the capture files using Sysdig Inspect. So let's look at the activity audit first. So this activity audit provides me with a list of commands that were executed. And I can do some basic troubleshooting or forensic investigation here itself. Or if I want to dig deeper, then I can go back to the respond button and look at the capture file using Sysdig Inspect. So when I do that, it shows me all the syscall level detail within Sysdig Inspect. I can see how many files were modified and how many were accessed, how many files got deleted, how many interactive commands got executed. And I also see the network connections and the listening ports. So the network related details are always a leading indicator of any attack that takes place on your infrastructure. So now, since I want to do a little bit more investigation, I look at the executed interactive commands. So when I drill down here, I can see all the commands in a list as they got executed in the terminal shell. And I can also choose to look at the IO stream of each command. So what this IO stream allows me to do is perfectly recreate any attack that took place on my system. And such a tool, such a feature is unique to Sysdig Secure on IBM. And it's very useful during forensics and investigations.
All right. So, what's really neat is that because containers are so ephemeral, right? Like a container will run and then disappear. Um, Normal monitoring systems can lose track of what just happened. It's gone, right? Like the container doesn't exist anymore. A lot of the artifacts from that container are gone. What happened, right? And an attacker who is, skilled enough would create a container, run their malicious payload in the container would disappear, and all the evidence from that attack would disappear except for the little, backdoor payload or something. And so, with Sysdig monitor running, you've captured all those events. Sysdig Secure is able to process those events and discover, hey, this went on, and leave you artifacts that you can go dig into and find out. That's awesome. So, through this, we've done a lot of conversation up to this point about how you can either secure the code you're going to push in production, monitor the code that's in production for new vulnerabilities that occur, so that even though yesterday everything was cool, someone's released a new vulnerability, there's now CVEs against code that you released, you want to get alerted that you have stuff in production that's vulnerable. You have runtime scanning to look for weird changes, different behaviors. I personally have seen things like, hey, why did my home network suddenly send 3 gigabytes of data upstream? What's going on? Turned out it was Amazon. Someone had turned on photo sync and it was syncing gigabytes of photos up to Amazon. I turned that off. But it's those kinds of things. You want to be alerted anomalies on your system, right? So that's the runtime scanning. And we have all these built-in adhere to compliance things, etc. The last piece is really make it easy to meet your audit requirements, make it easy to show that you're doing the right things, because we've enabled developers and DevOps people to run things securely. But it's now, I think the last step is really, how do you make it easy to show that you've done the right things?
Yep. And as we say, Andrew, we always want a proof of compliance, and Sysdig really makes it easy to get that proof. And we believe in continuous compliance, where we are giving that snapshot of how you're doing with regards to compliance, and at the end of the day you also get all the reports that are necessary for you to meet your stated compliance mandates, right? So we have the posture tab here, and it's really geared towards this compliance persona. And we can schedule different type of benchmarks or best practices sort of checklists over here, and we already see some in flight which are related to NIST or GDPR or PCI. But you can also schedule new benchmarks, and For example, you can have like a CIS benchmark scheduled within Sysdig Secure. And when we do that, we can have a certain type of a controls check report running every 2 weeks or every week as needed, or as per the time frame that we want to have this report. And then the good thing about this is it not only checks which controls have been following the compliance mandate and which are failing, but you can also download this report and send it to the people who do not have access to Sysdig, right? And so, for example, let's take a look at how these benchmark tasks run. And so every compliance mandates will have these controls and sub-controls listed in them, and we'll have multiple of these failing controls. So what Sysdig Secure will do is give you the way to fix these failing controls, right? So these are the type of actions or remediations that you can take outside the Sysdig Secure platform, and you can kind of work with your existing Kubernetes infrastructure to fix those controls from failing, right? And then you can rerun the benchmark and have a new report which shows that all controls are passing, and then you can use it for your auditory purposes, right? So that, in short, is the posture side of things. But you can have these benchmarks running for something like Linux as well, right? And we build these benchmarks out of the box for you. So when there are version updates to a certain Kubernetes benchmarks, you automatically get these benchmarks delivered right into your Sysdig secure system, right? So you don't have to worry about mapping and remapping controls again and again. We take care of those kind of changes for you.
Yeah, this is so much nicer to work with versus what I call the spreadsheets of doom. 300 row, really dense spreadsheets that list out all the control names and what you're supposed to do, and then the challenges for the person working through that set of compliance controls to walk through each of the cells of that spreadsheet and figure out, how do I go gather that evidence? What do I have to plug in here? There are definitely lots of tools that solve the same problems that we're talking about here, but there are very few tools that solve it all together as one thing. So, again, a centralized tool makes it easy for you to meet compliance, makes it easier to, make sure you're doing things securely, keeps a watch on your production systems, very valuable for a lot of people. And again, the fact that it's built on top of the same agent as Sysdig Monitor means that you're not having to install yet another thing into your system. Maybe unspoken here is the fact that in order to deploy new code into your production system, you might need to get more permissions or more, authorization to say, hey, oh yeah, we're going to approve this piece of code. If you're already using Sysdig Monitor, then you've already got that piece of code approved and in production. It's just a matter of running some more tools in the back end, which is a super story.
Absolutely. And Andrew, I always like to give a little bonus at the end of when we near the end of every presentation. So the bonus feature that I was talking about was the network visualization feature that we have within Sysdig Secure. So you can choose what cluster you want to create a network security policy for, and then you can choose the namespace. And then you can define, you firstly can visualize all the things that are necessary for you to create a network policy, like IP addresses, what are the different app namespaces, right? You can look at the egress and the ingress side of things. You can create different rules with regards to these policies. And then in the end, you have a nicely generated policy for networks, which you can deploy within your Kubernetes clusters, right? So this is just like a cherry on the top feature that we have, but it is extremely useful if you are a cloud operator and looking at the maintenance of Kubernetes clusters on a day-to-day, where you want to have like these quick fixes to certain events that you might be looking at within your event stream, right? And they might be requiring certain network policy changes that you can quickly apply. So with that, I'll give the control back to Andrew, and we can discuss a few more things before we call it a close on this session. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I think I mostly said everything I wanted to say. But I wanted to, this is the first time I've had a chance to work with you, which was awesome. Like I said, I've been around with Sysdig for a number of years with IBM launching and stuff. And, my experience with that team has been awesome. It's been a lot of fun working with, I'll put air quotes, a startup. I think that Sysdig is a mature group of people. A lot of folks there that have enterprise experience have come to Sysdig and work there. I'll mention that a lot of the things we talked about here, like this is great for customers and ISVs building things. Well, guess what? We're all, my team, the Sysdig team, we're building things in cloud and running stuff in cloud, and we really care deeply about this. So a lot of the pain that we talked about, how to deal with Log4j, how to deal with active attacks, how to deal with compliance requirements, how to deal with audit requests, all those things are very close to home. We need those things. They happen day to day for us. There's not a week that doesn't go by without, okay, there's a new CVE, and it's interesting. I mean, I was probably preaching to the choir here in the sense that everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about because you live and breathe this stuff, but it's the executives that are extremely worried about, oh my gosh, are we going to be front page news? What should we do to make sure we're not? And you get asked for all these, like, hey, can you go and make sure that this isn't happening, or like, it's because there's such high visibility in the media today about security incidents. Something like Log4j, people ask you the craziest questions and they want proof, right? They want to say, what are you doing to prevent this? And we're like, oh, well, I'd love to just go, it's okay, we're doing the right things, I got it. But they want to see, right? Everybody wants to see proof to me that we're good, because so much is on the line. And again, Sysdig Secure is a great answer to that. It's a nice set of tooling that helps us show those things that help make things a little easier for you to gather the evidence. You're not dealing with spreadsheets of doom, or at least as much. They still get generated. You still get us figure out how to do those things. But being able to run an audit report and getting something back you could feed into the process is extremely valuable.
So Andrew, now that this session comes to close, I wanted to thank everyone for coming and attending. And I also wanted to mention that there are other sessions going on within this conference, such as the one for IBM Cloud Monitoring, which is another of IBM Sysdig collaborations happening right now. And you can also check the recordings of those sessions later when you have some time, and hope to see all the audience members there as well.
Excellent. Thank you.